Welcome, everyone, to this evening's class, Landscape Transformation on a Budget. Now, in order to help you do the work is you will be getting an email tomorrow evening with a series of resources and links. One of them you're getting is this great booklet, which talks about a lot of the underlying principles of these types of gardens. And there will be that as well as links to resources that California American Water will be providing for you. So with that, take it away, Wendy.
Hi, I'm Wendy. I'm from the southern region of California American Water. I am the water conservation specialist. I manage San Diego, Rosemead, and Ventura County. And I am so grateful that you've been able to join us out of your busy day. Take this time to watch this great webinar. I'm sure you'll get some wonderful tips. And I just want to thank also G3 for always sharing your expertise with us and providing these webinars to our customers. And have a wonderful time watching.
Well, thank you very much. And it is definitely our pleasure to be able to share this information. And thank you, California American Water, for supporting your customers in such a great way. Okay, landscape transformation on a budget. So what all are we going to be talking about as we cover this conversation? And this is actually a class that was requested by California American Water, recognizing that some of their customers might be working with a more limited budget, and how could we support them in making some sort of transformation and improvement? So the pieces of the puzzle that we're going to be looking at tonight are: one, what is the vision? Number two, what are the elements of a garden? So they may or may not be some of the things you've already thought about. Number three, what are your priorities? And again, sort of along the same lines, what are priorities that you want to make sure get covered beyond just, I want it to look beautiful? Not that that's not important. Number four, this is really the crux of it here, which is, where do you invest in a professional, and where, in looking to save money, do you look to your own skills or those of your community? Number five, this one's fun, other ways to save. And then number six, some last thoughts. So that is the agenda for tonight's class. Let's get going. So what is the vision? In the beginning, you might have a landscape that looks like this. And this landscape could be just about any place. It could be in Northern California. It could be in Southern California. It could be in the Central Coast. It's pretty typical. You've got a house, you've got a lawn, you've got a tree, you've got a parkway. But the question, and this one is so much fun, is, well, what could that look like? And there's so much to be said for letting our imagination run with this. So at the end of the day, you may not be able to have everything that you imagine it, but oftentimes what will happen is we will actually censor ourselves or shrink what we think is possible because we assume that we can't afford it. So here are some of the things that might be going through your head. Certainly when I'm working with my clients, these are questions that we are answering together. So many people want to use the outdoors as an opportunity to be with friends and family. This idea, if you have a larger space, that you are actually traversing. So it's not just that you're outdoors, but that there are rooms and secret passages, and it makes it just a little bit more maybe mysterious. For others, having flowers, whether it's flowers to smell or flowers to cut or flowers to watch as, a bee or a butterfly lands on it, having that as part of the experience, and this idea that there's a meandering path that takes you through that garden. for others, and this is not an either or, this is, oh, I want that, and I want that, and I want that, the possibility that you would want some sort of water feature. So obviously with water features, you've got the sound, but then you've also got the little critters that will come for a drink. And it's been so much fun to watch all the birds, especially as they're migrating, will stop in the garden for a drink before they go on their merry way. And then if you have little ones, the possibility that you would create a garden that is really for them. That isn't just, a big people garden and, here's your chairs, but creating something that is really quite deliberately for them. And as we're thinking about all of this, it's quite possible that you're going, well, I don't have enough of this, and I don't have one of these. How do I actually make this possible? So this is what we are going to be talking about over the next 50 plus minutes, is what does it look like when you are ready to spend perhaps time or your creativity or tap into your community or finding out what resources are available to you. Because just because you can't pay it out of pocket doesn't mean that it's not possible. Puzzle piece number 2, elements of a garden. So there's 2 different things when you're looking at your landscape that you want to consider. So the first one is, what is the infrastructure? So what has to be there in order to actually have a healthy, resilient landscape? And then there's the functionality of it. So how does it function? How do you want to be in your landscape? How do you want to enjoy it? And so, like so many things, it is rarely just one aspect. And so we'll be covering different parts of this question. So when it comes to functionality and the infrastructure, one of the super important things you're looking at is, well, what is happening to the rain? What's happening to my gutters and downspouts if you have them? If I live on a hillside, are there erosion concerns I need to be looking at? Very important. We'll come back to this one again and again. What is the quality of your soil? Because it almost doesn't matter what you plant, it will be improved as your soil gets healthier. And then obviously, what is happening with your microclimates? Are there parts of the garden where it's deep, deep shade? Other parts of the garden where it's glaring sun? I think one of our one of our attendees had put in the chat that she had western facing sun and was looking for some ideas on, what would be a garden to create that wouldn't get cooked by that very intense sun. And then here's the other part of it, of course, which is, how do you want to experience that garden? When we have turf, it's usually almost an afterthought. You walk from the back door to the garage and there's basically a green carpet that you look at. But all of a sudden, the possibility of creating something that you can experience either by yourself or with others, that changes significantly. That becomes way more interesting. So this idea, we talked about the meandering path. How do we want to do that as we're doing it? Making sure that the hardscape that we are installing in a garden is porous, is permeable. So we don't want to be pouring slabs of concrete, but rather what are opportunities for hardscape with gaps. So we've got some beautiful examples here. Some are going to be more or less expensive. Same concept here with gathering spaces. So that was paths. These are gathering spaces. Some of these materials you can get very inexpensively at like a Home Depot's or a Lowe's. Others like flagstone or those large concrete pavers, those can be a little bit more expensive, a little bit more involved. And then we keep moving along, shade. We are hitting triple digits more and more frequently. So what do we need to put into place that can help offset that can provide some shade as the weather warms up? And then privacy, especially if we live in an urban setting, we are very close to our neighbors. And sometimes that's a good thing. And sometimes we would like to know a little bit less about them. So what are opportunities for creating a friendly barrier, if you will? And when we move now more into the plants, yes, absolutely ornamental plants, cut flowers. But for some folks, the possibility of now being able to move into more of an edible garden or a medicinal garden, a healing garden, a tea garden. So lots of ways that we can interact with our plants beyond simply looking at them. And then, of course, wildlife. So these gardens, unlike turf, are an invitation to a greater variety of wildlife. So obviously you've got birds and you've got bees and you've got lizards and maybe you've got possum that are visiting and maybe you've got raccoons and snakes. But the idea, the importance is obviously that we share with other beings on the planet. And when we convert these gardens, it is an opportunity to provide sanctuary or habitat in a world where that is shrinking. All right, priorities. So as we've been imagining, it's quite possible that you had a very good time and you had very, very creative. And some of the things that you were imagining was the possibility of a deck and a gazebo and a trellis, maybe some cool flagstone. The image on the right is actually a mosaic that they put in. And so be aware that when you start looking at hardscaping and structures, you need to be prepared to spend a little bit more money. Sometimes you need to be prepared to bring in a professional to actually do safe designs for you. It may require permits. It will require potentially a contractor to actually do the building for you. So more expensive, more complicated, requires more planning. And not to say that if you don't have that expert or you have that expertise, somebody who's super, super handy, and you found some lumber and you've got all these dishes that got broken and you want to do something creative with them, the possibility that you can do that. Now, another one is lighting. So certainly if you live on a street and there's no lamp post and you don't have a lot of light on your house, that you would want to put some in, that this would become a priority for you as a safety measure. And that, there weren't, maybe there's a motion sensor that you want to put in. But that being said, between that and turning your house into a Christmas tree, there is quite a range there. And so perhaps being aware that if you want light, that also is going to be a little bit more of an investment. And then irrigation. So when it comes to converting a lawn to, let's call it a watershed wise landscape, the irrigation is one of the big ticket items. And like some of the other things we're going to be talking about, important that it be done correctly. So irrigation is not a place you want to be cutting corners or, just picking up somebody on the corner. You definitely want to make sure that it is done correctly. So as we look at our priorities, we are going to look at the function of the landscape. So we say that we want to focus first on the watershed approach. So what is the soil? What grows the plants? How do we capture the rain? And then everything else is a little bit more cosmetic. So a watershed is defined as an area of land where all of the water that drains over it or flows under it goes to the same place. What we want you to do is to look at your property as a mini watershed. And so the top of the roof is like the top of the watershed, the street is the bottom of the watershed, and everything in between is within our capacity to improve. 4 key principles: that living soil sponge. Again, doesn't matter what you want to grow, having that soil sponge is going to be fundamental. Holding onto a rain as a resource. So not this year, but last year, the state of California got some 73 trillion gallons of rainwater, and we held on to about 10%. So as we move into another, at some point, it's just a matter of time, another drought cycle, we're going to look back and go, oh my goodness, why didn't we do a better job of holding on to that rain, to that free source of water, to that clean source of water? So super important as you look at converting your garden, that this is not something that you bypass. Number 3, of course, selecting climate appropriate plants. And yes, natives, absolutely natives, but it doesn't have to be exclusively natives. That there are other Mediterranean plants that will work really, really well in our climate. And then number 4, adding supplemental water, but only as necessary. So it might be that if you're, starting some new plants, you've just put them in, that, yeah, you're going to need to add some water. Maybe that you can do with a hose or with one of those oscillating sprinklers, or maybe you are looking at putting in an irrigation system. So we're going to go through some of the key components as you are getting ready to put together your garden, and approximately how much you need to plan for. And one of the things that we can't do is say, oh, this is going to cost you, X number of dollars, $10 a square foot, or, a design's going to cost you $1,500, because there are so many variables, so very many variables. But what we can do is say, out of a budget, whatever that budget is, a certain percentage of it should be held for or planned for as you go through this process. So just a reminder before we get going, I've got Jacob and Wendy behind the scenes available to answer your questions. So don't miss out. All right, so the last thing you want to do, talk about a way to waste money, is to take everything out and not have a plan for what you're going to do with it. And so typically we would say anywhere between 10 and 20% of your budget should be set for planning. It's similar to that old saying, you measure twice, you cut once. You plan multiple times before you actually do the work. Now we're going to talk about how you can save money on the planning, but definitely it is not something that you should just go, oh, I don't need to worry about that. I'm just going to go to the nursery. The soil is the foundation. So it's not a huge percentage of the work that you're going to be doing, but its value to the success of your landscape is essential. And so really it comes down to this, that you can imagine the loveliest garden in the world with all of these beautiful flowers, and you've spent all of this time going, oh, this blooms in spring and this blooms in summer, and I've got a tree. If you have not spent time taking care of this very, very essential thing, your garden will suffer. Capturing every drop of free rain. There are easier and more complex ways of doing that. 20% of the budget should be sort of geared to that. It goes a little bit hand in hand with taking out some of the turf as well. But the idea that you're going to contour your soil so that you can hold on to the rain. And then, of course, selecting plants that require less water. So there is a huge push towards taking out turf because it takes up a lot of water, and replacing it with climate appropriate, California friendly, drought tolerant. They're all kind of the same thing. And they are low and very low water users. So, typically in the state of California, we've got anywhere between 10 to 30 inches of water per year. Turf uses, goodness, anywhere between 4 to 6 feet, depending on where you live, of water per year. And then our low and very low, we're hovering at about, let's say 8 to 12. So the idea is that you are picking plants that can thrive on the amount of rainwater we get, that are not having to tap into our water budget in order to meet that gap. And then diversity. So we say nature loves diversity. Yes, mostly local natives, but again, doesn't have to be exclusively. This garden is all natives. It's probably April, May, June. And there are so many reasons for diversity. Certainly on the surface, there is just the abundance of what we're looking at. There is also all kinds of habitat for birds, for pollinators, for beneficial insects. And then it also expands the diversity in the roots. So we rarely think about that, except, the plant needs a little bit more water. But if you look at the far left there where it says typical turf, and I've heard people say, "Ooh, I've got Bermuda and the roots go so deep, they go down 12 or 18 inches." And you go, yeah, okay. But you look at some of these other prairie grasses and they're going down 13 and 14 feet. So we've got different kinds of roots, we've got different depths of roots, and then really, really important is that each of these different kinds of root systems invites different biology. So the more diversity we have in biology, those microbes beneath the surface, the more quickly our soil will become healthier, more porous, more nutrient rich. And then, as I said, diversity invites those pollinators, those beneficial insects, which means that now you don't need to get those pesticides or herbicides or what have you. All of that is going to save you money. So the big question is, you've got a budget, and everybody has a budget. It may be a small budget, maybe a big budget, but at some point it's like, I've got X number of dollars that I'm going to put into this garden. So the question becomes, how do you take that dollar and invest it into the work you're going to do? So it's a little bit like that Venn diagram, right? It's going to be your choice. You've either got the time to do the work yourself, or you've got the money to pay for someone. And then quality is sort of, for me, I think regardless of time or money, I am going to want the quality. But basically, it's going to be you're either going to spend your time or you're going to spend your money. So when we look at, sort of how to determine that, and we'll be going through the different elements in a landscape conversion in a little bit more detail, so that you can go, oh, this is an opportunity where I can save money. This is an opportunity where I would want to invest. So the advantages, obviously, of working with a professional is it will save you time. And not only will it save you time, you will also benefit from their experience. So I've been working in landscape for over 2 decades. I have a lot more experience now than I did when I first started. And certainly when I was, playing with my garden on my own. So I have learned, I have made mistakes. And my clients, each time I design, has a little bit more of that experience that comes with. Now, the other possibility, and there are some that are definitely in this arena, and that is that they're going to do it themselves. And in some cases, very much because they want to save money. In some cases, because that's just who they are. And so it's quite possible it's likely it's going to take you a little bit longer as you are figuring things out. And it's possible that you are going to make some mistakes, that if you were to do it again, next time around, you would have learned from those mistakes. So it just depends on what are the mistakes you can afford to make. Now, the benefit of hiring someone is you kind of hire them and then they do the work and you can go ahead and live your life. And then at the end, you come out and you've got a finished garden. Now, even when you hire someone, it's not that simple, but give or take. If you are doing it yourself, yes, you are absolutely saving money. But some of the other benefits are that there is a deeper understanding of what you have done. So it's really, really different when you've looked at a bunch of YouTube videos on how to program your timer, as opposed to a contractor comes out, boom, 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 does it for you, and away you go. So if you have to troubleshoot or all of a sudden the program has gone wonky, you know how to fix it. And then the last one, super important, is that it stimulates creativity. We have definitely gotten very, very attached to our screens and our phones. And so this is the opportunity to be out there in the land, hammering and nailing and digging, and experimenting and playing and sharing that experience with other people. So as we look at the different components of doing these conversions, the first one we're going to look at is design. So it is quite possible that you could design your landscape yourself. And some people will say, oh yeah, let me at it. My mom was a gardener, my grandmother was a gardener, or I've got a green thumb, I can do this. And other people, it's like, nope, this is not a place where I am going to be counting on my aesthetics to be able to do it. So for those of you that are interested in doing it yourself, we've got these guidebooks. So there's this one, the California Watershed Approach, which breaks down those different components of the watershed that I talked about in the very beginning. But it also has templates, it has resources, it has a project list, it has a list of plants. So it is a great place to start to understand what all is involved, and then ways that you can get more information or more knowledge about those different components. I mentioned templates. So there are templates in that booklet. There are many, many templates online. And it's great if you pick a template and they happen to have them for your part of the state. So, depending on where you live, this particular one is down here in Southern California. They created 4 different templates. The plants that they recommend are plants that would work down here. However, you can look at this template and its layout and go, oh, okay, well, that's not a tree that's going to grow well in Sacramento. Let me replace that tree with something else. Same thing with the shrubs and the ground cover. But what you have is a layout where you've got a tree and then you've got a perimeter of shrubs and then you've got some ground cover. So you know what it looks like. And then it's just a matter of swapping out plants that will do well in your climate. Now, I realize in saying that, that it is easier said than done, but it is absolutely doable. Other things that you can do is take a class. So you are taking a class tonight. There's all kinds of classes that California American Water is going to be hosting. So come to as many of those as you can. Take other classes. This is a very, very popular area. And there's all kinds of resources happening near where you are to be able to continue to learn more. Now, as far as working with a professional designer, yes, you absolutely can. And again, it's going to depend on who you are and what you want. But one of the areas where we would definitely encourage you to work with a professional is if there's any kind of hillside or slope that you want to be changing. If there's grass on a slope and you're going to be taking it out, the last thing you want is bare dirt sitting there right before the rains come. Sometimes when we teach the rainwater class, people will ask, well, can I capture rain on a hillside? And you can, and you definitely want to be working with a professional for that. If there's any kind of drainage issues, if there's flooding that's happening, again, these are all opportunities, recommendations, because the potential consequences of not doing this well are more significant than your plant died. Okay, moving on to the construction phase, putting it into the ground. Personally, this is where I hire a professional, taking out the turf. So there are different ways to remove turf. We've got some classes on removing turf. You're welcome to take that and learn how to do it. It's also in the book in great detail. There's two methods you're going to do it. You can smother the turf. You can just sheet mulch on top of it. That is not always successful. So it may be that you need to resort to sod cutting. And in this case, you've got equipment, you're rolling it up, it's heavy, you bring in a dumpster. And you can do it yourself. You can certainly go to an equipment store and rent a sod cutter. You can have a dumpster come in. You can bring in, the family over a weekend, and you can do it. It is labor intensive. Things to be aware of is stay away from the chemicals. It looks easy, but knowing that there is a price to everything. So the consequences, it doesn't just disappear after 24 hours. So a little more time consuming. Definitely there will be some grass that grows back, but this way we stay away from the chemicals. And then you need to plan for how you are going to dispose of the turf. So if it's a little parkway, yeah, maybe you can put it, get rid of it in the trash can, but odds are you're going to have a lot of it. And, you saw those rolls that we were looking at, they're heavy. You definitely don't want them hanging around, right? You want to be able to get rid of the turf so that you can plant your garden. So the easiest way to do that, yes, you can have, somebody haul it away in a truck, but again, it's quite heavy. And so really the best way is to bring in a dumpster. You do that through your waste management company. Sometimes you need to plan for a permit, so that's an additional expense. But again, time or money. Now, the contouring for rainwater, anybody could do this. Our rainwater rain gardens are very shallow, 5 to 6 inches deep. You can see that's what these guys have been doing. So it's just like a shovel. It's easier if you wet the soil, much easier to remove it. And then obviously you have to take that soil that you have removed and put it out into the landscape as berms. So one of the other classes, all about rainwater capture, where you can learn how to do that in more detail. And it's also in the guidebook. Now, sheet mulching. Sheet mulching, this is how we turn that dirt, which is under the turf, into a soil sponge. So when I teach this class in person, I will sometimes bring a sponge and I'll say, so what are the similarities here? And it's like, it's the little holes that make it the sponge, right? So when it rains or even when we irrigate, it is sucking that water up, holding onto it until the plant needs it, and then slowly that water is released to the plants. And you got worms and you've got roots and you've got, again, billions upon billions upon billions of microbes that are doing that work for you. So in the guidebook, these are the steps. Basically, if you have removed the turf completely, the sheet mulching is they call it the lasagna method, where basically you're putting down layers of paper and compost and mulch and lots and lots and lots of water. And then as that material starts to break down, this is how we feed the biology. All of that life beneath your feet, this is how we feed it. And as they start to multiply and as they are creating their waste, this is how we start to change the structure of our soil and provide more nutrients for those plants. So this is, yes, you can definitely do this yourself. We joke and say it's an opportunity to catch up with family and friends. This is definitely something that is easier, more fun to do with others. And the possibility that, they come and help you, and then you go back and you help them. The idea of barn raising. And as part of the sheet mulching, you need compost and you need mulch. If you've got the space, it is cheaper to bring it in bulk. So for example, I have 1,000 square feet of garden, and I would need, in order to have the right amount, 3 to 4 inches of mulch, I need 10 to 12 cubic yards. So it's a pile that you're going to be bringing in. And This is another place where you don't want to be skimping on your mulch. The mulch is important for weed control, for keeping the soil cool, keeping the soil moist, and then as it breaks down, which it will continue to do, it feeds the soil. So mulch, you're actually replenishing every so often, right? Not replacing it, just adding more. And then the planting is the easy part. So you can do this. You can plant. We recommend planting as small as possible. So potentially you can do everything. And, maybe you're bringing in a larger shrub or a small tree. You might need a little bit of help with that, but goodness, you can do this. And the plants are the least expensive part of this whole thing. Seeds are what, maybe $2.49 for a little. And you can get all kinds of seeds. You can get edibles, you can get wildflowers, you can get shrubs, you can get ground cover. The possibility that you can root plants or start cuttings. So there's all different kinds. This is a great way when you're doing like an herb garden to be able to swap with people. Salvias are great plants to start. So just do a little research and then experiment. Literally, what have you got to lose? Now, if you're purchasing your plants, then you are looking at, again, bringing in as small as possible. The smallest comes in flats. Typically, you will see this for ground cover. This flat is 16 by 16 inches, and you can cut it up into as many pieces as you want. So you can do, one by one, but typically that's a little bit hard, certainly for someone who's a do-it-yourselfer. You're usually looking at like 3 inches by 3 inches or 4 inches by 4 inches. And then you just break it up and then put it in the ground. And then, depending on what your options, if you can plant as a quart, which is the plant on the far left, 1 gallon is pretty typical for what we'll install. And then 5 gallons. 5 gallons is when I'm looking at a vine, for example, or there's a shrub that I want to get started, a screening shrub, something like that. But everything else, I'm planting in ones and in quarts. And then as far as 15 gallons, that is typically for trees. Sometimes people will bring in big trees, 24-inch boxes, 36-inch, like they bring in full trees. That gets to be very heavy, very expensive, and a lot more can go wrong. So if you can do 15 gallons, what they have found is that the plants that start smaller will quickly catch up to the ones that are a little bit larger, and then oftentimes exceed that rate. Now, depending on where you live, some of the rebates have a minimum plant. So for example, down here in Southern California, there's a rebate and their minimum is 3 plants per 100 square feet, which is not very much, honestly. We are big proponents of more plants, more abundance. Again, this idea that the more diversity we have, the benefits just ripple along. So more plants, more diversity, the faster that conversion is going to happen, which means that your plants are going to get going even more quickly. And the more plants you have, the less weeds you'll get, and you will actually get shade more quickly. So shade, cooler soil, less water. And as we saw, plants are just not that expensive. Other things to think about is to pick your plants wisely. So this isn't the only reason that you would pick plants, but if something is, I've only got 3 plants, I want to cover some space. There are some plants that are going to grow to be 2 feet wide, and then there are some plants that are going to grow to be 8 feet wide, and they cost about the same. So if you need to cover a lot of ground, especially if it's a ground cover, then pick a plant that grows bigger. And then here's a big question you're going to ask yourself, which is, do you actually need that irrigation? So it may be you already have irrigation and you're wondering if you can do a conversion. We're going to talk about that. But remembering that the premise of these gardens is that I've got that living soil sponge, I'm holding on to rain, I've got climate appropriate plants. Maybe I'm going to need a little extra supplemental water, but is it worth putting in an irrigation system with all the headaches that come with that? Only you can decide. And then sometimes there are drip kits out there and they go, yeah, you can just simply convert your existing spray system to a drip system. And there is a disclaimer to that. So not every irrigation system can simply be converted. Especially if you have an older system, we sort of cut it off. If you have an irrigation system that's older than 5 years, you might need to plan on doing a more significant conversion. So this irrigation system is probably as old as the house, and it is old. The pipes are old, valves are outdated. So yeah, we would not be doing a simple conversion on this. And again, irrigation is definitely a place where I bring in a professional. At a minimum, for the plumbing, to install your controller, to do the trenching on the laterals, bring in a professional to do that. You may need to add things like a pressure regulator or a backflow prevention system. And again, some people feel comfortable doing. It's going to be for you to decide. If you decide that you want to do some of the irrigation yourself, have a pro do this, and then you install the tubing. So even with the tubing, there are things to know, mistakes you can make. Again, it is less likely the consequences of not doing it correctly than if there are things that you're doing incorrectly with the below the surface. Plus, this is much easier to see, much easier to repair. And then, of course, save a ton of money. Get to know your garden and hand water. And maybe what it is that you can't do it for the entire garden, but maybe you've got an edible garden that you've got. Or maybe there's a garden that you're saying, your kids are going to take care of, and they get to take care of it with the hose. But there is something to be said for being in the garden as you water it that just gives you a very different experience. Sometimes in a desire to save some money, you may choose not to work with a professional. So just again, disclaimer, some of the things we want to make sure you are aware of as you make your choices is that a professional is not going to be licensed. They will have no insurance, they will not be bonded, and in some cases their knowledge may actually be limited. So the issues with all of this is that you may have somebody doing something that they actually don't know how to do. And if something goes wrong, either on your property or on somebody else's property as a result of work that was done, that you as the owner are completely liable for whatever happens to you or to your neighbor. If you've got a licensed and bonded professional, then they've got insurance that protects you. Now, it can feel overwhelming to look at your garden and go, oh my gosh, I don't think I can do all of this. You don't have to. You can start small. That's what they did here. They took out maybe 36 inches, especially where it was more critical, where we were getting overspray onto the sidewalk there. Remove the turf there, and then they're going to go ahead and plant some natives. Now, here is a radical consideration, and that is that you actually leave the turf in place. Or if you've got a front yard and a backyard and you're going, I can't do both, I'm going to focus on the front yard or I'm going to focus on the backyard. The possibility that what you end up doing is you leave the turf and you overseed it. So you're going to overseed it with clover, with wildflowers, with small ground covers. You're actually going to prep the soil before you do that. And then what'll happen is as we go from a monoculture of turf to a polyculture lawn, the quality of your soil is improving. It is becoming more porous. So if at some point down the road, next year, in 2 years, you go, wow, I'm ready to finish that conversion, you are that much further ahead of the game. Your soil is so much healthier. Removing it will be easier. And then having your new plants adapt will happen more quickly. Wow. Just a few minutes to go here. Other ways to save. Make sure you ask your questions before we run out of time. All right, free mulch. Yes, there are definitely municipalities, water agencies that will give away free mulch. There's also a program called Chip and Drop. It's one of the links we send you where they match tree trimmers with homeowners. You get what you pay for. But the big thing you get is a lot of mulch. So it's not like you can say, oh, I only want, 4 cubic yards. They will drop off whatever's in their truck. Green waste, instead of paying to have it hauled away, you can actually create something called hugelkultures with it. So in some cases, it can enhance the functionality of a swale. This is what it looks like. So it's basically a mound that's been created with all of that green waste, and you add soil and you add compost and you add mulch and you add plants. And it becomes like a nurse log in a forest. Pretty cool. No need for weed fabric. We say it actually grows weeds. You use paper instead, brown paper, way cheaper, biodegrades. You don't have to worry about all of, you pick out the plant and all of a sudden there's all this like black plastic all over. As far as the rain gardens, yay, you're putting in a rain garden, but you do not need boulders. You do not need gravel. You can absolutely plant your rain garden, and it's actually much happier if you do. Plant sales, plants, they are everywhere. So there's giveaways, there's garden tours, what have you, where there's an eclectic mix that you can go ahead and experiment with. And then certainly simplifying the vision. So yes, I still wanted to gather with my friends and my family, but maybe it's just a picnic table and some benches. And what's more important really is the people and the food. As far as a path, you can start with a mulch path. You don't have to do a big fancy thing with stone or pavers. You can absolutely do this. All you need is an area that isn't planted that you can walk through. You can make your own water feature. The possibility you just need a waterproof container and a pump. It's possible to drill a hole and to seal it. So you can definitely get creative. And then really, it's up to you how you choose to make that. Compost, same thing. I mean, compost isn't that expensive, but you can certainly make your own. You can do a compost pile, or you can do a worm bin. And then I love garage sales. There are treasures to be found in them. So maybe you get plants, you get outdoor furniture, you get art that you can put out there, you get shovels, tools, what have you. It is a treasure trove. Facebook, all kinds of great things that you can find on there for really, really good prices. And then depending on what you want to build or how creative you want to be. Using found material. I used to do dumpster diving. We would drive by, they had just like torn down a house, and I would go to my husband, stop, wait, and then find all kinds of goodies inside. And the idea that anything can be a planter. Anything can be a planter. And disclaimer, you need to make sure that whatever is going to be your planter has drainage, right? Otherwise, you're going to have a plant sitting in standing water that will kill your plant. And if you're growing edibles, that whatever lines the container is non-toxic. So it might be that you've got to get, a plain old plastic pot, that's what you plant, and then you can put that in something else. But just be aware of those two things. Last thoughts. Don't forget about afterwards. So these gardens are low maintenance or lower maintenance. They are not no maintenance, and especially in the beginning, where you will have grass that is growing up, or you will have weeds because the soil has been disturbed, or some of your plants are going to struggle because you're still getting the irrigation right. Other things that can help you, for which there are rebates, is a smart controller. So this definitely helps take some of the guesswork out of what you're doing with your irrigation. And then who are the resources to help you? And there are so many. This landscape thing is something that brings people together from all different components. So obviously your water provider can be of service. Your municipality can be of service. Oftentimes there's a sustainability division or a climate adaptation division or public works. Master gardeners are a great resource for education, compost, what have you. Community gardens, learning from other people as well. It's a great place to get cuttings or seeds. And then vocational training resources. So there's different organizations where they want to give their people the experience of helping create these gardens. So yeah, take advantage. Look around. There's probably meetups, garden meetups, certainly all kinds of stuff on Facebook. And then look to the village. Look to your community, look to your neighbors, look to your friends, look to your family. Certainly with neighbors, the possibility that everybody goes in on a load of mulch or a tool bank. Not everybody has to have a shovel, but one person has a shovel, one person has a hoe, one person has, what have you. The idea of raising a barn, something we used to do where it's like, I help you, you help me. And then sharing plant cuttings or seeds. And then finally, unlike so many things, this really should be fun. The idea of being out in the landscape, of bringing things to life, of inviting nature into the backyard or the front yard. Certainly, if you've got a wild front yard, the possibility that your neighbors are stopping by and going, "Ooh, what's that?" So yeah, just a way to be in the world in a better way. All right, so as we wrap it up, wanting to let you know the different programs that California American Water has for you. Depends on where you live. If you're in LA or Ventura, you're going to go to SoCal Water Smart to see what they have available for you there. In the San Diego area, they've got a turf removal program, $1.50 a square foot, up to 750 square feet. In Sacramento, Meadowbrook, and Hillview, $2 a square foot. All of this as long as the funding lasts, and you will be getting links to all of these different resources. And then in Sonoma, $1 a square foot while the funding lasts there. There are also rebates on those smart controllers and other outdoor devices. So going back again to SoCal Water Smart. You were getting questions. Were there questions that are sort of a general nature that you want to go ahead and share, Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of really great questions. A lot coming in at the end here regarding ground covers, weed barriers versus the paper with the use of mulch, and several of like. So I really don't use weed barrier, and we really don't want you to use weed barrier. Anywhere you go in a year or two, the weed barrier is going to look terrible. There's going to be weeds growing through it, flapping up corners. It's black. It's expensive. And so the best thing really is just if you can sheet mulch, it's the best way to do it. So really it's the paper that you initially roll out. If you get the big rolls of like painter's paper, it's really easy to kind of roll those out. You wet it down as you roll it, to kind of mat it down, especially if it's windy. But as you roll that out, that blocks out the sun. And then you're layering with mulch. We say at least 3 inches, but I always like to start with at least like 5 or 6 inches when you're starting your project, so that it lasts and you don't have to worry about it. You're buying it in bulk, you're doing all the shoveling. So layer it up thick in the beginning, and that was really going to keep out your weeds. You have to look at like the corner areas and stuff, but we do in the guidebook give you methods for what we call like the burrito method, where you sort of double layer against all the hardscape, which is usually where the weeds and the grass wants to come back. So that would kind of be like the big thing. Other like very specific questions. We did have some folks that are looking for like ground covers for weed suppression in particular. That was before we kind of looked at growing more of a natural lawn. And I would really encourage some folks to think about if that's something you'd be interested, is really having more of that natural lawn look. Doesn't require all of the removal, the planting. It's a very low cost, kind of easy way to really improve the health of your soil and save on water for that as well. Let's see here. There's a couple questions coming. This one's very specific about redwood roots, so I was looking up a good resource to send them for that. See if I can pitch you another one maybe to talk about. We have a good mix of people north and south. So I was like, okay, where are you coming from based on your plants? I would really reiterate, Marianne, can you recommend the California Native Plant Society website real quick while I answer this last one?
Sure. So that's calscape.org, calscape.org. So that is a website where you can put in your zip code and it will provide you with plants that do well in your area. So it helps minimize, finding a plant that you love only to discover that it doesn't really do well in your neck of the woods. And then you can go ahead and get even more specific. So you can go, oh, I want trees, or I want shrubs, or I want plants that do well in the shade, or what have you. And the only thing to be aware of is that it is only California natives. So if you were looking at, maybe plants that came from Australia or from South Africa, you wouldn't find those there. So just to be aware of, it's like, oh, I wanted a lavender. It's like, well, you won't find a lavender there, but you will find California natives with all kinds of information about them. Anything else?
I'm looking up some tools for this. Looks like some other stuff just came in. So Sharon's asking about cardboard would work as well as paper. Do you want to touch on that?
Sure. So cardboard does work. It can be a little more challenging to work with because it's much stiffer. So especially where you're doing a rain garden, where you're trying to contour it. But you also have the possibility of doing, cardboard where it's flat, and then doing the brown paper where you've got the rain gardens. And then you just have to make sure that the cardboard is clean so that there's no tape on it or no shiny stuff on it. It's a great metaphor to go the same thing, the same way that you would look at what you put into your body when you eat for your health, is look at how you put things into the garden for the garden self. So that's why no chemicals, no weed fabric, because that stuff doesn't break down because it is detrimental. So when you're going, is that an okay thing or not an okay thing? Really looking at it from that perspective, and I think it sort of helps answer the question.
Great. If you've got, this is from Deidre here, if you've got existing shrubs, trees, and you want to improve the soil quality, you can always add a layer of like compost just right to the soil surface and mulch on top. It's always going to help sort of from the top down. Another thing you can do, and I recommend this too, if your soil is just really, say, compacted, or it's just really, really dense clay, is to get an auger and actually drill holes in about 12 to 18 inches deep and kind of strategically auger holes, being careful not to hit any of the roots of, say, your existing magnolia tree, and fill those holes that you just bored out with something like compost, a compost tea, or worm castings. Worm castings personally are my favorite. That's going to really boost the microbial activity in these kind of deeper plugs. That's going to really spread out and improve the quality of your soil quicker without having to do anything like invasive, because you really don't want to disturb the roots of your trees. So just be careful going around, but also just layering it on the top would be a great way to improve that as well.
Right.
Okay, let's see. Looks like Wendy's answering that one. That one's very specific. Christine is asking steep slope replanting ideas, timing, selection, drainage, question mark. I would refer you to the
That's a
again,
big question.
yeah, there's a lot in there. Depending on how steep, a really steep slope is tough to work with. I'm actually working with one right now that's probably closer to like a 30, 35 degree angle. And so we're looking at sort of the swale idea, but really focusing on sort of the riprap that you're adding to it. It's a very difficult process right now, though, and it's going to cause more erosion in order to kind of get it to where we want it to go. So I would really suggest, if you're really working with the steep slope, contact a professional. There are certain trees that are going to do well, certain ground covers that will do well. It's very difficult to work on, so it's not like you can kind of have anyone come out working on a slope like that, even myself. It's very exhausting. And so it's also very dangerous. You're dropping things anytime you bring stuff in, it rolls down. So I would recommend working with a professional on that. Plants, though, there's tons of plants that do well on a slope. So if you go into the Cowscape Garden Planner Marianne mentioned, they have specific lists that are for our slopes. And so you can find slopes native to your area that are going to be low and very low water that are going to do well to help stabilize that slope. But ideally, just generally speaking, you want some very deep-rooted, large trees, large shrubs, and lots of ground cover. That's going to help to maintain and decrease the runoff and the erosion that you're trying to mitigate.
And don't take everything out in November, because you want your plants to be established before the rains come, so that you're not, yeah, you don't want that bare soil.
Yes.
All right. So Wendy, is there anything that you would like to say as we call it a night?
I did put our website link into the chat. It's a great resource. It has information on our rebates and other things specific to your district. So be sure to click on the link and find your district, and you can always call our hotlines and we can answer your questions for you. And thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yes, yes. Have a great evening and happy gardening.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Good night, Jacob. Good night, Wendy.
See you, Mary. Bye, Wendy.